My son prayed for my death to inherit the house, but the doctor read my report and I still remember the first day I stepped foot into this house. My late husband, Richard, had just finished painting the front porch. His hands were blistered, his back sore, but his smile, oh, that smile was brighter than the morning sun. He looked at me, sweat rolling down his forehead, and said, "Mary, this house will keep you safe long after I'm gone." It wasn't much compared to the mansions in our town. Just a 2-story brick home with faded shutters and a squeaky gate. But to me it was paradise. Every corner held a memory. Every wall whispered a story. Richard and I built our lives here. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, rainy nights where we listened to the thunder together, holding hands like teenagers again. Even after his passing, I never once thought of leaving. This house was more than bricks and wood. It was him. It was us. Now, at 68, my steps are slower, my hands tremble more often, but my heart still beats with pride every time I sweep that porch or water the roses Richard planted. I live alone, yes, but I never feel alone here. This house is my companion. My son Daniel doesn't see it that way. To him, this house is nothing more than property, a piece of inheritance with a price tag dangling from the doorknob. He visits, yes, but rarely out of love. Each time, his eyes wander over the furniture, the yard, the walls, as though calculating its worth. He doesn't ask if I've eaten, or if I need help carrying groceries. Instead, he says things like, "Mom, when you're gone, I'll remodel the whole place. Maybe even sell it and buy something modern." When he says those words, my chest tightens. I wonder if he even remembers the nights he used to crawl into our bed after a nightmare, or how Richard carried him on his shoulders around the garden. Does he not feel the soul of this house? I try to excuse him sometimes. Daniel is busy. He has his career, his marriage. But deep down, I know it isn't busyness, it's greed. Melissa, his wife, has only made it worse. She has expensive tastes and even more expensive dreams. She's mentioned more than once right in front of me. Once we get the house, we'll finally be able to host the parties we deserve. The house. Always the house. I smile politely when she says it, but inside I ache. I want my son to remember me as his mother, not as the owner of a future asset. One evening, Daniel and Melissa came over for dinner. I had prepared his favorite, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and cornbread just the way Richard used to make it. I thought maybe, just maybe, it would warm his heart. Instead, Melissa wrinkled her nose and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "This place smells old. Honestly, Daniel, I don't know how she still lives here." Daniel chuckled, not even defending me. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Well, it won't be forever. We'll fix things when the time comes." I swallowed the sting in my throat and forced a smile. But as I cleared the plates, I caught sight of my reflection in the kitchen window. Tired eyes, a weary face, and the faintest shimmer of tears. That night, when they left, I sat alone at the dining table. The food was cold, the chairs empty, but the house seemed to lean into me, reminding me of Richard's promise. "It will keep you safe, Mary." Yet for the first time I felt unsafe. Not because of burglars or illness, but because of my own son's growing coldness. I never wanted riches. I never desired gold or silver. My treasure has always been love, family, and the simple joy of having a place to call my own. But Daniel, my own flesh and blood, looked at me as if I were already gone. And though I tried to shake it off, though I told myself he didn't mean it, I could sense something deeper, something darker building inside him. I didn't know then just how far his greed would go. I didn't know the prayers he whispered when he thought no one was listening. But I would soon find out. And when I did, it broke me in ways I never thought possible. As the months went by, I noticed how much Daniel had changed. My son, once the boy who used to run barefoot across the yard chasing fireflies, was now a man whose shoes clicked like authority against the floorboards and whose words cut sharper than knives. It wasn't just age. It was her. Melissa. She entered his life with perfume that lingered like smoke and eyes that measured everyone in terms of status and wealth. She was beautiful, I'll admit that. Beautiful in the way a diamond looks on display. Polished, cold, untouchable. But behind that beauty was something that unsettled me. A hunger. A greed that made my chest ache, because I could see how easily it swallowed Daniel whole. Whenever she visited, her gaze wasn't on me. It was on the silverware, the china cabinet, the jewelry I still wore from Richard. And most of all on the house. "This place could be so much more modern," she once remarked while sipping tea at my dining table. "All it needs is the right touch. An open floor plan, marble countertops, maybe even a pool in the backyard." I smiled thinly. "I think it's just fine the way it is. It has character." Melissa set her cup down with a clink. "Character doesn't pay bills, Mrs. Taylor. Equity does." The way she said it, Mrs. Taylor, not Mom, sent a chill down my spine. She never once called me by anything resembling family. I was an obstacle, a gatekeeper standing between her and her dream of hosting high society soirees. Daniel never corrected her. If anything, he seemed to encourage her way of thinking. I began to realize that my son, the boy I had raised with lullabies and prayers, was slipping away into her world. One night, they invited me to their new apartment for dinner. I wanted to decline, but Daniel insisted. "It's time you see how Melissa and I live." When I arrived, the place was dripping with luxury. Marble floors, glass chandeliers, velvet curtains. Everything screamed money, yet it felt lifeless. No warmth, no history. Just a showroom masquerading as a home. Melissa floated around the dining table like a queen, serving expensive wine I could hardly pronounce. Daniel sat at the head, boasting about his investments, his connections, his plans for the future. I tried to contribute, to tell them about the small garden I was tending back home, the roses that had finally bloomed after a hard winter. But Melissa cut me off with a laugh. "Roses? Oh, Daniel, isn't that adorable? Your mother still plays gardener. When we move into her place, we'll hire professionals to landscape everything. No offense, Mrs. Taylor, but some things should be left in the past." Her words stung like vinegar on an open wound. I lowered my eyes to my plate, cheeks burning. Daniel didn't defend me. He only smirked, twirling his wine glass, and said, "She's right, Mom. Times are changing. You should think about the future." The future. Always the future. But in their version of the future, I was nowhere to be seen. I forced myself to finish the meal, nodding and smiling as if her words didn't pierce me. But inside my heart was breaking. Was this truly my son? The same boy who once knelt by my bed when I was sick with the flu, whispering, "Don't leave me, Mommy. I need you." Now it seemed he needed only what I would leave behind. When I returned home that night, I set my purse down on the old armchair and collapsed into silence. The house seemed to embrace me, its walls a comforting shield against the cruelty I had just endured. But even here their words echoed. Equity. Modern. Hire professionals. When we move into her place. They spoke as though I were already gone, erased, a ghost lingering in the halls of a house that belonged to them. I wanted to believe Daniel still loved me somewhere beneath Melissa's influence. I wanted to believe he was simply blinded, misguided, pressured by the world he had entered. But then, late one evening, as I passed by the guest room where they stayed during visits, I overheard Melissa's voice through the thin walls. "She's getting older, Daniel. It won't be long. And when that day comes, the house is ours. Just be patient." Daniel's voice followed, quiet but firm. "I know. Sometimes I wish it would just hurry up." I froze, every bone in my body turning to ice. My own son, my flesh and blood, wasn't praying for my health anymore. He was waiting for my absence. And though I told myself I must have misheard, though I clutched my chest and whispered, "Not my Daniel, not my boy," deep down I knew the truth. The son I had raised with love was slipping away into shadows. And soon those shadows would consume him completely. Started with something small. A cough that wouldn't go away. A wave of dizziness when I stood up too quickly. First I dismissed it. At my age, aches and pains come like uninvited guests. You don't question them, you simply learn to live with them. But then the fatigue grew worse. Carrying groceries left me breathless. Climbing the stairs to my bedroom felt like climbing a mountain. At night, I would sit on the edge of my bed, pressing my palm to my chest, whispering Richard's name, hoping the strength he once carried in his broad shoulders might somehow pass into me. I didn't want to worry Daniel. But ironically, I didn't have to say anything. He noticed. Only not in the way a son should. One evening, as I struggled to pour tea into his cup, my hand trembling so much that I spilled a few drops on the table, he leaned back with a strange look in his eyes. Not concern. Not compassion. Something else. Something colder. "Mom," he said. His voice casual but laced with something sharp. "Maybe it's time to rest. You've worked hard your whole life. Maybe it's time to think about what comes next." I looked up startled. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, but I could see the glint in his eyes. "You know, planning. The house, the future. It's inevitable." His words sank into me like stones. I smiled weakly, trying to brush it off, but my chest tightened. He wasn't worried about me. He was anticipating me being gone. Later that week, Melissa came by while Daniel was at work. She stood in my living room, arms folded, looking around as though she already owned the place. "You're not looking well, Mrs. Taylor," she said smoothly. "Maybe you should see a doctor. At your age, you never know what might suddenly happen." I tried to steady my voice. "I'll go when I feel it's necessary." She smiled thinly. "Just remember, the sooner you face reality, the easier it will be for everyone else. Daniel worries, you know. He doesn't say it, but he thinks about what comes after." What comes after? Those words echoed in my ears long after she left. I decided then to book a doctor's appointment. I didn't want to, but I needed answers. For myself, and perhaps even to quiet their restless greed. Daniel insisted on driving me. His eagerness unsettled me. He carried none of the nervous tenderness of a son accompanying his mother to the hospital. Instead, he seemed almost excited, his fingers tapping the steering wheel impatiently as though waiting for an outcome he already knew. "Don't worry, Mom," he said, forcing a smile as we waited in the sterile white hallway. "Whatever happens, I'll take care of things. You don't need to stress about the house or the future." I looked at him, my heart twisting. He thought he was comforting me, but all I heard was, "When you're gone, I'll handle what you leave behind." When the nurse called my name, Daniel leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Remember to be honest about your symptoms. We don't want to miss anything serious." He spoke as if he were the one receiving the diagnosis. Inside the doctor's office, I sat nervously while blood was drawn, questions asked, and notes scribbled. The doctor smiled kindly, assuring me it was likely something minor, but Daniel's impatience told a different story. As we left the hospital, I overheard him on the phone. His voice low but urgent. "Yeah, I'm with her now. Results will be ready soon. Just wait, this is it." My stomach nodded. Who was he talking to? Melissa. Friend. Someone already waiting to hear about my health, as though it were a lottery ticket being drawn. That night, lying in bed, my body weak, I whispered a prayer. Not for myself but for Daniel. For his soul. For the little boy I once rocked to sleep, the boy who clung to me when storms frightened him. But as my cough rattled my chest and my bones ached with exhaustion, a cold realization washed over me. My son wasn't praying for my healing. He was praying for my death. It was a Thursday night, quiet and heavy with the kind of silence that presses against your chest. My cough had kept me awake, so I padded softly down the hall for a glass of water. Daniel and Melissa were staying in the guest room that evening, claiming they wanted to help me after my hospital visit. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe my son still cared, that maybe I had misjudged him. But as I approached the kitchen, I froze. Through the thin walls of the guest room, I heard his voice. "My Daniel. My boy." He wasn't whispering to Melissa. He wasn't talking on the phone. He was praying. At first, my heart warmed until I heard the words. "God," he murmured, his tone hushed but clear. "Take her away. She's lived long enough. She's in pain, she's tired. Just take her so I can finally have peace. So I can have the house. It's mine and it's time. The glass in my hand nearly slipped. My breath caught in my throat, trembling as though the walls themselves had betrayed me. I pressed my back against the hallway wall, clutching my chest as the sound of his voice cut through me. Melissa's voice followed, low and persuasive, like venom dripping from a serpent's tongue. Yes, Daniel. Pray for it. The house is wasted in her hands. She's clinging to the past. We deserve it now. Just keep praying. God listens. My knees nearly buckled. I wanted to storm in to scream. How dare you? But my voice abandoned me. My body shook with a grief I cannot describe. My son. My only son. The child I carried, birthed, fed, clothed and loved. The boy who used to kneel by my bedside, hands folded, praying for my health when I caught the flu. Now he prayed for my death. I stumbled back into my room, closing the door as quietly as I could. The walls seemed to close in on me. I sank onto the bed and pressed a pillow to my face, muffling the sobs that tore from my chest. Richard, I whispered into the darkness. Do you hear this? Do you see what has become of our son? I did everything I could. I gave him everything. And now he waits for me to die like a vulture circling the sky. The tears would not stop. They burned my cheeks, hot and endless. For the first time in my life, I wished my husband were still here, not just to hold me, but to shield me from the cruel truth that our son had grown into a man consumed by greed. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing the echo of his prayer over and over. Take her away. The house is mine. By morning, my eyes were swollen, my body drained. When I walked into the kitchen, Daniel was already there, cheerful, pouring himself coffee. Good morning, Mom, he said lightly, as though he hadn't cursed me in the shadows of last night. I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger wearing his face. He leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee. You look tired. Maybe you should rest more. You don't want your health getting worse. His words twisted like knives. Did he not realize I had hurt him? Or did he simply not care? Melissa appeared behind him, her silk robe gliding across the tile. She kissed his cheek and turned to me with a smile too sharp to be kind. You should listen to Daniel, Mrs. Taylor. Rest. Don't strain yourself. The future is closer than you think. Her words sent a chill down my spine. That day I pretended to be fine. I smiled, I made them breakfast. I even laughed at Melissa's shallow jokes. But inside something shifted. A piece of me shattered. And another piece hardened. Because now I knew the truth. My son wasn't waiting for my recovery. He wasn't hoping for my healing. He was praying for my death. And though it broke me, though it nearly destroyed me, it also lit a fire in my soul. If he wanted me gone so badly, then I would fight harder to stay alive. Not for him. Not for Melissa. But for myself. For Richard's memory. For the house that still held my love, my history, my dignity. And most of all, for justice. The hospital waiting room was cold that morning, though perhaps it was only me shivering. I sat in the corner, hands clasped together, my breath shallow as I waited for my results. Daniel had insisted on coming with me. You shouldn't be alone for this, Mom, he said. But I knew better. He wasn't here to hold my hand. He was here to hear the verdict. As I sat there, my eyes wandered to him. He wasn't pacing like a worried son. He wasn't whispering prayers for good news. He was calm. Calm. His lips curled faintly, as though rehearsing the victory speech he'd delivered to Melissa when he told her I was dying. He leaned over at one point, his voice low. Whatever the doctor says, Mom, just know you don't have to worry about the house. I'll take care of everything when the time comes. When the time comes. I forced a weak smile, but inside my heart crumbled. At last, the nurse called my name, and we walked into the doctor's office. Dr. Miller was an older man. Kind eyes behind wire-framed glasses, the sort of doctor who carried not just knowledge but empathy in his voice. He greeted me warmly, then glanced at Daniel. Are you her son? Daniel nodded proudly, as if the word son meant more than his actions ever proved. We sat down, and Dr. Miller opened the folder on his desk. He cleared his throat, flipping through the papers. My heart pounded in my chest. I dared not look at Daniel, but I could feel his eyes fixed on the doctor's lips, ready to devour whatever news came next. Finally, Dr. Miller spoke. Mrs. Taylor, I've reviewed all your test results. The fatigue and coughing are due to a minor chest infection, likely aggravated by stress and age. It's nothing life-threatening. With antibiotics, rest, and some dietary adjustments, you'll recover well. Silence. For a moment I thought I had misheard. Life-threatening. Infection. Recover well. I exhaled, tears filling my eyes. Not from fear but from relief. But Daniel, oh Daniel. His jaw tightened. His hands clenched on his knees. He blinked rapidly, disbelief flashing across his face. Are you sure, doctor? He asked, his voice strained. I mean, are you absolutely certain? Maybe you missed something. She's been so weak. Could it be cancer? Or her heart? Dr. Miller frowned, tilting his head. No, young man. I've been practicing medicine for 30 years. Tests are clear. Your mother is not dying. She's in better shape than many women her age. She just needs rest, not fear. Daniel's face burned red. He forced a laugh, awkward and brittle. Oh, well, that's good news. Course. Right, Mom. That's good. But the hollowness in his tone betrayed him. Dr. Miller leaned toward me then. His eyes kind but sharp with unspoken understanding. Mrs. Taylor, take the medicine I'll prescribe, and don't let unnecessary stress get to you. Stress can do more harm than illness itself. I nodded, whispering, Thank you, doctor. But as I glanced sideways at Daniel, I saw it, the mask slipping. His lips pressed tight, his shoulders stiff, his eyes dark with something ugly. On the way home he was silent. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles whitened. The silence was louder than words, thick and suffocating. Finally, halfway down the road, he muttered, Doctors don't know everything. Sometimes people just go. Out of nowhere. You should still get your affairs in order, Mom. Just in case. I turned my head to the window, biting my lip to keep from crying. I had heard enough. He wanted me gone. He wanted the house. And the doctor's words had ruined his plan. That night, as I sat in the quiet of my room, I remembered the doctor's warning. Stress can do more harm than illness itself. I realized then that my greatest illness wasn't the infection in my chest. It was the infection in my family. And unlike medicine, there was no easy cure for that. The ride back from the hospital had been suffocating. Daniel said little, his jaw clenched, his fingers drumming on the steering wheel. By the time we pulled into the driveway, I could almost feel the storm brewing inside him. That evening, as I sat knitting quietly in the living room, I overheard muffled voices in the guest room. Daniel and Melissa were arguing, but not the kind of argument that comes from love. No, theirs was the language of greed. She's fine, Daniel hissed. The doctor said it's just an infection. She could live for years. Melissa's voice rose, sharp and venomous. Years? Are you kidding me, Daniel? We don't have years. Do you know how long I've been waiting to move into that house? To make it ours. I am tired of living in an apartment when your mother is clinging to a house she doesn't need. There was a pause. Then her tone softened, like poison disguised as honey. Listen, if she won't die soon, then you make her hand it over. Convince her. Tell her it's about planning for the future. Say you're worried about taxes, paperwork, whatever it takes. Just get her to sign it into your name. Once it's official, it doesn't matter how long she lives. My hands trembled as the yarn slipped from my fingers. They weren't just waiting anymore. They were plotting. The next morning, Daniel approached me in the kitchen. His voice was sweet, too sweet. Mom, he began, placing a hand on my shoulder. I've been thinking. You shouldn't stress about things like bills or paperwork. You're not getting any younger, And I don't want you burdened. Why don't we go see a lawyer together? You could transfer the house into my name now, while you're still healthy. That way, if anything happens, everything is already taken care of. It's called planning ahead. I froze, the knife in my hand hovering over the loaf of bread I was slicing. Slowly I set it down. Daniel, I said softly, my voice trembling, your father built this house for me. He wanted me to live here until my last breath. Why would I give it up now? He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because it's practical. 'Cause it's smart. Don't you trust me, Mom? The word trust lodged in my chest like a thorn. Melissa swept in then, draped in silk as though she were already lady of the manor. She sat at the table, crossing her legs elegantly. Mrs. Taylor, don't be stubborn. This isn't about taking anything from you. It's about security. Think of Daniel. Think of us. What if something unexpected happens? Do you really want your house tied up in legal issues? Just sign it over now, and you'll never have to worry. Her eyes glimmered, hungry and calculating. I looked at them both, my son and his wife, and for a moment I felt small. A frail old woman, cornered in her own kitchen. But then I remembered Richard's words. His promise that this house was meant to keep me safe. I straightened my back. No, I said firmly. This house will remain mine. Until the day I die. Daniel's smile faltered. His eyes hardened. Mom, don't be unreasonable. I'm your son. Who else would you leave it to? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Being my son should mean more than a house, Daniel. If all you see when you look at me is property, then perhaps you've forgotten what it means to be family. His nostrils flared. Melissa slammed her cup of coffee onto the table, her tone sharp. You're making a mistake. A big one. I met her gaze steadily. Maybe. But it will be my mistake. Not yours. The silence that followed was thick with fury. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile. He muttered something under his breath, something I couldn't quite catch, but I knew it was not kind. They left shortly after, their footsteps echoing down the hall like thunder. I sat alone in the kitchen, the morning sun spilling across the table. My hands were trembling, but my heart felt strangely steady. For the first time I had stood my ground. But deep inside, I knew this battle wasn't over. If anything, it had only just begun. That night, after Daniel and Melissa stormed out of the house, I sat in my armchair, staring at the faded photo of Richard on the mantel. His smile, frozen in time, seemed to steady me. For years I had lived in grief, but now I realized something. Grief was nothing compared to betrayal. I could feel Daniel slipping further into Melissa's grasp, and I knew that if I didn't act soon, I might lose not only the house, but my dignity. So I made a decision. The next morning I dressed in my best Sunday clothes and took the bus into town. Daniel thought I was too frail to handle things on my own, but he underestimated me. I walked into the office of Mr. Peterson, the family lawyer Richard and I had trusted years ago. His hair was grayer now, his glasses thicker, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. "Mary," he said warmly, shaking my hand. "It's been too long. What brings you here today?" I sat across from him, folding my trembling hands in my lap. "Mr. Peterson, I need to change my will." His brows lifted, but he nodded patiently. "Of course. What would you like to change?" I drew a shaky breath. "I want to ensure that my house remains in my possession until the day I die. No transfers, no early signatures, nothing. And after my death, I want to set conditions." He tilted his head. "Conditions?" "Yes," I said firmly, my voice surprising even me with its strength. "If Daniel, my son, shows care, responsibility and respect, then he may inherit the house. But if he tries to manipulate me, neglect me, or force me into signing it over, then I want the house donated to charity. Let it serve people in need, rather than feed his greed." Mr. Peterson studied me quietly for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "That's wise, Mary. Very wise. Tears prickled my eyes. I never thought I'd live to make a will against my own son. But I need to protect myself. Richard would want that. By the time I left his office, the papers were signed, sealed, and secure. I walked down the street with my head held high. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control return to me. When I returned home, Daniel was already waiting on the porch. His face brightened with false charm. "Mom, where were you? You shouldn't be out by yourself." I smiled softly, hiding the truth in my chest. "Just errands, Daniel. Just errands." He didn't need to know. Not yet. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the battle I was silently fighting. Daniel thought I was weak. Melissa thought I was foolish. But they didn't understand. Age does not erase wisdom. Quiet does not mean powerless. I began to prepare in small ways. I kept careful notes of conversations, the cruel things Melissa said, the pressure Daniel applied. I placed Richard's old voice recorder in my purse, ready to capture proof if I ever needed it. I also began taking better care of myself, not for Daniel's sake, but for mine. The antibiotics cleared my chest, my strength slowly returned, and I found comfort in small routines, tending the roses, reading scripture, writing in my journal. And in those quiet moments, I found a kind of strength I hadn't felt in years. I decided I would not confront Daniel, not yet. Confrontation would only fuel his anger. Instead, I would wait. I would watch. I would let his own greed expose him. Because one thing I had learned in all my years as a mother was this: when a person's heart is poisoned by greed, they eventually poison themselves. All I had to do was survive long enough to see it. And survive I would. It was Melissa's idea to host a family dinner. She insisted it would bring everyone together. I knew better. Melissa didn't care for unity, she cared for display. She wanted people to see her seated at the head of my table, already rehearsing the role of mistress of the house. Despite my reluctance, I agreed. Family, after all, is family, even when it cuts you deepest. I cooked all day, setting the table with Richard's old china, the ones we only used on holidays. As I laid each plate, I whispered his name, begging for his strength. When evening came, Daniel and Melissa arrived dressed as though for a gala. Melissa wore a silk dress that sparkled under the dining room light, and Daniel walked in with his chin high, carrying an expensive bottle of wine as though it were a trophy. The neighbors came too. Old friends from church, a few distant cousins. The house was filled with chatter and laughter. For a moment, I almost believed this dinner might bring healing. But then, as the plates were cleared and dessert was served, Daniel's mask cracked. "Mom," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the hum of conversation. "We need to talk about the house." The room grew still. Forks paused midair. My heart sank. "Daniel," I whispered, "this isn't the time." But he pressed on, his tone hard. "Why not? Everyone here knows it's only a matter of time. You're not getting younger, and Melissa and I need to plan. It's irresponsible for you to hold on to property like this without thinking of the future." A murmur rippled through the room. My cousin shifted uncomfortably. The neighbor's eyes widened. Melissa leaned forward, a smirk tugging at her lips. "He's right, Mrs. Taylor. You can't expect to keep clinging to this house forever. It's too much for you. It's time to pass it on." I felt every eye turn toward me, the weight of humiliation pressing down like a stone. My cheeks burned, but I forced myself to sit tall. "This house," I said quietly but firmly, "was built by your father's hands. He wanted me to live here until my last breath. And I will honor that." Daniel's face darkened. His voice rose. "Stop living in the past, Mom. You're being selfish. Melissa and I could make something of this place. You'd rather rot here alone than let us build a future." Gasps echoed around the table. My hands trembled, but I did not waver. "Selfish," I whispered. "Daniel, I gave you everything. My time, my energy, my love. And now you call me selfish because I won't hand you the last piece of my life." Melissa scoffed, rolling her eyes. "See, this is what I mean. Stubborn, clinging, unreasonable. No wonder Daniel feels so trapped. The word trapped pierced me deeper than any blade. The neighbors shifted, their faces etched with discomfort. One of them, Mr. Hayes from across the street, cleared his throat. "Daniel, that's no way to speak to your mother. She's done nothing but care for you." But Daniel ignored him. His fists clenched, his voice shaking with rage. "I'm done asking nicely. You will sign this house over to me, Mom. One way or another." The room fell silent. The air itself seemed to freeze. I looked at him then, not as my son but as a man I no longer recognized. My heart broke, but my voice remained steady. "No, Daniel. Not now. Not ever." The silence cracked as Daniel shoved back his chair, its legs screeching against the floor. He stormed out of the dining room, Melissa trailing behind, her heels clicking angrily against the tile. The guests sat in stunned silence. Some lowered their eyes, others shook their heads. I forced a trembling smile, whispering, "I'm sorry for the scene." But deep inside something had shifted. For the first time, Daniel's greed had been exposed, not just to me but to the world. And though humiliation burned in my chest, there was also relief. The mask was gone, the truth was out, and soon justice would follow. The night of that humiliating dinner lingered like smoke in the air. Neighbors whispered. Relatives shook their heads. I knew Daniel's pride had been wounded, and when pride mixes with greed, it festers into something dangerous. 2 days later, he returned to the house without warning. Melissa was at his side, her heels striking the floor like hammers of judgment. His face was tight, his eyes dark with fury. "Enough games, Mom," he snapped the moment he walked into the living room. "We're going to see the lawyer today. You're signing the house over. I won't let you embarrass me again." Melissa folded her arms, her smirk razor-sharp. "It's for the best, Mrs. Taylor. You're holding on to something you can't manage." My chest ached, but not from illness, from the cruelty of hearing my own child speak to me like a stranger. Still I kept my voice calm. "If you want to see the lawyer, Daniel, then we'll go. But remember, not all truths are yours to control." His jaw tightened. "Good. Let's end this once and for all." That afternoon, we marched into Mr. Peterson's office. The familiar scent of polished wood and ink greeted us. Daniel strode ahead, shoulders squared, Melissa at his side like a queen claiming her throne. "Mr. Peterson," Daniel began, forcing a smile, "we're here to finalize the transfer of my mother's house. She's ready to sign it over." Mr. Peterson's brows arched as his gaze slid to me. "Is that true, Mary?" I shook my head slowly. "No, it isn't. But perhaps it's time the will is read. For everyone to hear." Daniel blinked, confusion flashing across his face. "What will?" Mr. Peterson leaned back, steepling his fingers. "The updated will your mother prepared weeks ago." Melissa scoffed. "Updated? Why would she?" "Because I asked her to," I interrupted, my voice steady. "I knew this day would come." Daniel's face flushed. "What are you talking about?" Mr. Peterson opened a folder and began to read aloud. His voice was clear, deliberate, each word striking the room like a hammer. "This document declares that the property known as the Taylor residence shall remain solely in the possession of Mary Taylor until her death. Upon her passing, inheritance is conditional. If her son, Daniel Taylor, has cared for her faithfully, with respect and love, he shall inherit. If, however, he neglects, manipulates, or pressures her, the inheritance is void, and the property will be donated to the Taylor Foundation for families in need." Daniel's mouth fell open. Melissa's face blanched. "That's ridiculous," Daniel shouted. "She can't do that. I'm her son, it's mine by right." Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses calmly. "A parent has every right to set conditions. And your mother has made her wishes perfectly clear." Melissa leaned forward, her voice sharp. "She's sick. She doesn't know what she's doing. This should be void." At that moment the door opened, and Dr. Miller stepped inside. His presence was calm, steady, like a lighthouse cutting through a storm. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying authority, "your mother is healthier than you claim. I have her most recent medical report right here. Her infection is nearly cleared, her heart is strong, and with proper care, she could live many more years." The room fell into stunned silence. Daniel stammered, You don't know. She looks weak." Dr. Miller fixed him with a firm gaze. "Weakness is not death, Mr. Taylor. Your mother is not dying. And any attempt to treat her as though she were is not only cruel, it borders on abuse." Melissa's mouth tightened, but her eyes darted nervously. Daniel, on the other hand, erupted. "This isn't fair," he shouted. "That house is mine. I've waited long enough. You can't just take it away." Mr. Peterson closed the folder calmly. "It was never yours, Daniel. And if you continue down this path, it never will be." I turned then, my eyes locked on my son's. For the first time I let him see the pain he had caused me, raw and unhidden. "You prayed for my death, Daniel," I whispered, my voice trembling but firm. "And today God answered, not by taking me but by exposing you." His face went pale. Melissa pulled at his sleeve, but he wrenched away, slamming his fist against the desk before storming out of the office. Melissa trailed after him, her heels clattering like thunder fading down the hall. The room was quiet again. Mr. Peterson closed the will and placed it gently in my hands. Dr. Miller gave me a small nod of encouragement, and for the first time in months I felt safe. Because the truth had spoken louder than greed. The days after the lawyer's revelation were quiet, almost eerily so. Daniel and Melissa no longer came by uninvited. The phone, which used to ring with Daniel's clipped demands, stayed silent. For the first time in a long while, the house felt peaceful. For a moment my heart leapt. Maybe this was it. The apology I had been waiting for. The son I once knew returning to me. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped closer. But then his voice hardened. "You've made a fool of me. Everyone's talking about it. Melissa won't even look at me. Do you know what you've done?" I stared at him, my chest heavy with sorrow. "Daniel," I whispered, "do you know what you have done? You prayed for my death. You wanted me gone for the sake of walls and wood. You forgot that I am your mother." His lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes darting away. He muttered something about mistakes, about pressure, about Melissa's influence. But excuses are not the same as repentance. "You don't understand," he said finally, his voice trembling. "I thought if I had the house, everything would be easier. Money, security, respect." I shook my head slowly. "Respect is not earned through bricks and property, Daniel. Respect is earned through love. And you've spent yours like a gambler squandering his last coin." His shoulders sagged, and for a fleeting second, I saw the little boy he used to be. The boy who once clung to my skirts, begging me not to leave him at school. The boy who prayed for my recovery when I had the flu. But then he turned, his pride too heavy, his shame too deep. Without another word, he walked away, his footsteps fading down the path. I knew then that though the lawyer had protected my house, nothing could protect my heart from the wound he had left. Melissa never returned. Rumors swirled that she had found someone else, a wealthier man who could promise her more than my modest house ever could. Daniel was left alone, stripped of both wife and inheritance. And me. I remained. In my house. In Richard's house. In our house. One evening, I sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. I watched children play in the street, their laughter floating on the breeze. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, the scent of roses filling the air. For the first time in a long while I felt at peace. Yes, my son had broken my heart. Yes, he had wished me gone. But I had survived. I had endured. And I had learned a lesson I wished no parent ever would. Blood may tie us, but love keeps us. And when love is lost to greed, blood alone cannot hold a family together. I leaned back in my chair, my voice a whisper carried on the wind. Richard, I kept your promise. The house kept me safe. And it will keep our memory alive long after I'm gone. As the stars began to appear, I smiled. Not because everything was as it should be, but because I had found strength where I thought I had none. And I wanted anyone who heard my story to remember this. Never pray for the death of the hands that once fed you. For heaven may answer your prayer, not with fortune but with shame. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart.